Hello, Colosso members. Today is the second intro time. We'll briefly learn about Clip Studio and Photoshop. These are the two most used programs in drawing. Once I only used Photoshop and then changed the main work program to Clip Studio. I keep changing the program as needed. For those who want to use tools interchangeably, like me, or those who want to change the work program to another program, I prepared this lecture. Of course, I also prepared hidden features or some good tips to know as well. So, it'll also be helpful for those who only use one tool. When working on a picture, no matter what program you use, the most important thing is to use what fits your hand. I personally use Photoshop for the original paintings. I use Clip Studio for illustrations. The reason for dividing the tools like this is due to the pros and cons of both Clip Studio and Photoshop. Clip Studio has assets activated by default, so it is convenient to bring brushes or other materials for use. Being a drawing tool, it has a lot of easy tools for painting. On the other hand, Photoshop is a photo editing tool. Bringing the material is relatively less accessible than Clip Studio. Instead, it is easier to edit photos. It has many settings for easy compositing. So, those who do matte painting, or those who draw pictures by stacking them up with touch, seem to use it a lot. Except for the original painting, basically, I use Clip Studio more. So, I will explain based on this. Additionally, by comparing it with Photoshop's functions, I will tell you more. Rather than completely basic content, I'll cover good parts to use when working and some of the features that I find useful. As the overall layout differs for each person, just note that I use this way for reference. First, this is the Clip Studio screen. I am using the layout divided like this. On the left is the Tools tab. On the right, you can see the color circle and layer window. The tools are basically listed like this. I am using the brush in a single shortcut key, just like Photoshop. The important parts we will cover here are, as indicated by the stars I put, the selection tool, lasso tool and ruler, these three things, in total. Instead of a brush, I am talking about these tools, because while brushes depend to some extent on an individual's technical skills, these functions belong to an area of memorization. So, you can apply it and use it right away. This time, rather than brushes, let's focus a little more on the tools. This is a Photoshop screen. Similarly, on the left, there is a Tools tab, and you can see the layer window at the top right. The tools will be lined up like this. Likewise, the lasso selection tool and the automatic selection tool will receive more attention. Unlike the Clip Studio saw earlier, in Photoshop, the ruler is not directly exposed. This part will be explained briefly later when using a brush. Let's briefly compare the overall layout. Clip Studio and Photoshop will be divided like this. We can recheck the parts we mainly deal with. You can see that similar but different features are all over the place. It's the layer window. In some ways, this is similar, but in Photoshop, you can see that the options are at the bottom. Then, let's take an example picture and find out together how to use the selection tool and lasso tool mentioned earlier. We've moved to the Clip Studio screen. I simply imported an example file like this. Let's find out the selection tool first. The part at the top is the selection tool. If you click on this, a total of 3 options will appear. I usually only use the top one, but let me explain one by one. Let's see each selection tool function. The top one is referred to editing layer only, the second is referred to all layers, and the last one is selection for referred layers. It is divided into 3 parts in this way. Let's look at each one from above. First, refer to editing layer only. This literally means it only grabs the layer I'm selecting. Now, only the face side layer was selected. If you click on this, only the face will be captured. If you select the body side, similarly, it captures based on the body. Moving on briefly, the second one, refer to all layers, literally means selecting all layers we have collectively. With the face layer selected as before, if you click, you can check that it captures not the face side, but the outer body line with respect to this layer that is visible on the canvas we now have. The third was selection for referred layers. In Clip Studio, unlike Photoshop, a unique layer called referred layer is set up. I'll draw an example to find out this. First, let's create a layer. On the character's sleeve, I drew a heart shape. I think you can see the layer options. The second icon has the shape of a lighthouse, as you see. If you click this, the lighthouse icon appears in front of the layer. You can see that you've set this layer as the reference layer. Suppose that we created an empty layer. Suppose that I made one above. If in this state, I click on the canvas using the selection tool, originally, the entire canvas should be selected, because nothing is drawn on this layer. But as we made the layer at the bottom as a reference layer, as you can see, that I've selected it in this state. If I click in this state, we can see that only the heart part is selected. When there are so many layers, if we use reference layers to find or colorize layers, at least a little time will be saved. However, basically, I use a reference layer at the top. Instead, as mentioned earlier, this refer to editing layer only sets the layer I'm currently selecting. So, using it in various ways is not easy in this state. Note this auxiliary tool option below. You need to configure this part. Find it this way. Here in the auxiliary tool options, go straight down until you see this part called Refer Multiple. By default, it is not checked. You need to check this to activate the part next to I. Then, you can see that the color in this part changes brighter. The first is all layers. Based on every layer I click on, it captures this way. It's the same tool as before, but has changed differently. The second is the reference layer. This means that only the reference layer is selected. You can see that only the heart hair captured like this. Third, selected layer only captures the selected layer. Let me select the face side again, and then click. You can see that only the face side is captured. You can think that it is equivalent to the most basic option. Last, folder. As these line drawings are tied up in one folder, if you click, you can check that the area is captured based on the outside line.
영역이 잡히는 것을 확인할 수가 있습니다.
In these selection tools, there is a most important concept,
개념이 하나가 있는데요.
which is this part, the adjacent pixels selection.
인접 픽셀 선택인데요.
In my case, it's checked now. Adjacent pixels mean grouping the same color as the area I clicked on.
영역과 동일한 색상을 묶어준다는 의미입니다.
Instead, this concept applies equally to transparent pixels.
똑같이 적용이 되고요.
Moving forward from the color I clicked, if another color is blocking, it can't go on after that.
그 이후는 넘어가지 못합니다.
The concept is a bit ambiguous. To know what this means, uncheck this. Then, you will definitely understand the meaning. Let's uncheck it. Since it is now set as a folder, if you click, the outside of this part should be captured. But it comes out like this. The reason is that not only the outside, but the inside of this line were also chosen.
안쪽 부분 있죠. 이런 데까지 다 선택이 되어서 그래요.
Only if the adjacent pixels are selected, when the transparent outside pixel part is clicked, the line drawing will keep the inside from being selected and block it.
선택이 되지 못하고 막히게 되는 겁니다.
In this way, I can select only the parts I want and use it.
사용해 줄 수가 있어요.
There is also another important concept, which is the square boxes right here at the top.
이 윗부분에 있는 이 네모 박스들입니다.
The shape looks familiar somehow. The first is the union, the second is the difference, and the third is the intersection of sets. Literally, the union unifies the part I chose and the area of the newly clicked area.
지금 새로 클릭하는 부분의 영역을 합친다라는 뜻이고요.
The second difference subtracts the newly selected area from the originally selected area.
선택하는 영역을 제외한다는 의미입니다.
Finally, the intersection newly chooses the common area between the part that was originally selected and the newly selected part.
지점만 새로 선택을 하겠다는 의미예요.
If you utilize these set of functions during color matching or later work, it can be done more quickly and efficiently.
효율적으로 이용을 할 수가 있어요.
As it's one of the features I use a lot, I really wanted to tell you about it.
꼭 말씀드리고 싶었습니다.
Instead, if we click these options next to it one by one while working, it will be very slow.
굉장히 속도가 느려지겠죠.
So, I use these shortcut keys.
사용을 하고 있습니다.
First, let me select the outer part of this character and add the overall color scheme.
전체적인 배색을 한번 넣어주도록 할게요.
You can think of it as a review.
해주시면 될 것 같습니다.
It'll be possible if you set the layer in folder or all layers.
가능하겠죠.
The adjacent pixels I mentioned earlier must also be selected. Click in this state.
클릭을 해주고요.
The outer part is chosen here because the characters inside has a complicated shape, so we can't choose these parts one by one.
이 부분을 일일이 선택을 해줄 수는 없고요.
After selecting the empty outer part first, we'll flip this over and color the inside.
반대로 뒤집어서 안쪽에다가 채색을 해줄 예정이에요.
I always use this way when color matching.
활용을 하고 있습니다.
We now have to select this transparent part, which is something we won't choose later.
선택하지 않을 부분을 지금 선택해 줘야 돼요.
We'll flip it, so don't be confused about this concept.
하시면 안 됩니다.
Select the background and remove the unnecessary parts here. We'll add them together. Here we'll use the union difference and intersection.
교집합을 활용해 줄 겁니다.
I think we can use the union now, because we have to add unnecessary parts.
필요 없는 부분을 더해야 되니까요.
You can see that the cursor looks like this.
모양이 되어 있는 게 보이시죠? 지금
This is because I have selected the intersection. If you leave it as normal, it will look like this.
이런 식으로 나옵니다.
At this time, the selection area is moved. It doesn't matter if another option is selected in this state.
상관없습니다.
In this state, we see the shortcut key shift.
Shift 있죠?
Hold down Shift on the keyboard and hover the mouse, and then you'll see that it changes to a plus icon next to it.
마우스를 가져가면 이렇게 옆에 플러스 아이콘으로 바뀌는 것을 확인할 수가 있을 거예요.
It means that just for a moment while we hold down Shift, it is in a union state. So in this state, I'll check all the unnecessary areas.
체크를 해주도록 할게요.
we'll take this away too. Put it in like this, and the bottom part was unnecessary.
필요 없는 부분이 없네요.
So when the check is completed, in this state, we have to choose the inside.
우리는 안쪽을 선택해야 하죠. 지금
Right now, the outside is selected. The shortcut to flip this is Shift F7.
Shift F7입니다.
You can see it has changed like this. This time, this is also in the option above. If you click on the selection range, there is invert selection range in this part.
선택 범위 반전이라고 있습니다.
If you click on this, it flips over like this.
이걸 알 수가 있죠.
However, it is cumbersome to click them one by one.
이것을
So, it'd be a good idea to memorize the shortcut keys. Hold it like this.
잡아두시고요.
In this state, I create a layer below the line drawing and colored it gray to distinguish the areas.
전혀 구분이 가도록 회색을 칠해주고
You can just pour a paint bucket. You can also use the existing painter tool or basic tool. But when pouring a color into an entire area, it is convenient to use shortcut keys. There are two colors here. There is a color behind the front color. By default, the color in front is selected. If you want to pour paint in this color, press Alt Backspace, then the color comes in at once, like this.
이렇게 한 번에 색상이 들어가는 것을 알 수가 있어요.
If you want to pour the behind color all at once, press Control Backspace.
컨트롤 백스페이스를 눌러주면 이렇게 색상이 들어갑니다.
You can't see it because the background has the same color, but it's white. But since we'll use gray, we'll bring it in.
이렇게 가져와 줄게요.
Then we'll deselect it.
해줄 건데요.
Of course, by clicking in this tool state, we can deselect this selection.
이 선택 상태를 해제해도 되지만요.
But let's make this a shortcut too. Press Ctrl D to deselect the selection area,
해제가 됩니다.
like this. Then, you can see that only this gray part remains neatly.
확인할 수가 있겠죠.
Then, we'll try using other things.
다른 것들을 활용을 해볼 텐데요.
Since we did union the sets, we can find out the difference and intersection.
한번 알아보도록 합시다.
For example, suppose that I added another color to this gray layer.
하나 얹었다고 가정을 해볼게요.
I will add green color to the eyes.
넣어주겠습니다.
I've added the color one by one like this.
넣어주었어요. 자,
In
그러면
this state, I will only select these green eyes.
초록색 눈만을 선택을 해줄 거예요.
Now the area is very simple and intuitive, but if several of this color are included, it is good to use this function.
지금 같은 기능을 활용해 주시는 게 좋습니다.
First, after grabbing the whole, I painted the eyes green like this.
칠해주었습니다.
Let's suppose that I want to choose only the gray part of the entire color scheme.
가정을 해볼게요.
But in the current case, it is very simple as it is divided into only two colors.
굉장히 단순하지만
If the layers or colors are complex, it would be a good idea to use this feature.
꼭 활용하시면 좋은데요.
First of all, this gray area needs to be enlarged overall.
잡아줘야겠죠.
It's currently bundled into one layer like this. When you want to choose what's on this layer all at once, you can click each one to find them again as before.
일일이 이렇게 클릭을 해서 다시 찾아주어도 되지만
But we already chose the area once. In this case, hold down Ctrl and click on this image icon in the Layers window then, like this, everything inside this layer is selected.
이 레이어 안에 있는 모든 부분이 선택이 됩니다.
Ctrl appears a lot. If you memorize this, it will be very helpful.
많이 될 겁니다.
So now, I have selected the whole thing.
전체를 이렇게 선택을 해주었는데요.
In this state, we will exclude only the green area.
초록색만 영역을 제외시킬 거예요.
Then, you can use difference here.
활용을 하면 되는데요.
This also has a shortcut key. It's Alt.
Alt예요, Alt.
Press Alt to see that the icon changes like this.
확인할 수가 있죠.
So, if you click on it, the color disappears.
확인할 수가 있는데요.
Now that all layers are selected, this line will probably be colored the same way.
색상이 걸릴 겁니다.
That's why I change it to this selected layer.
컬러로 바꿔주고요.
If I remove it like this, I can see only the part I want coming out.
원하는 부분만 빠져나오는 것을 확인할 수가 있죠. 자,
Then
그리고
deselect it again with
선택을
Ctrl D.
Ctrl K로 해제해 줍시다.
Then
그리고
again,
다시
press Ctrl and click the image to choose the entire part.
해주시면 전체 부분이 다 선택이 되죠.
This time, on the contrary, suppose that I want to select only the color on this eye side.
싶다고 가정해 봅시다.
Then, at this time, everything is originally selected, like this. In this situation, I'll choose the eyes. So, the originally selected part in this newly selected eye part will have an intersection point here. This becomes the overlapping selection area. So at this time, you can add the intersection function.
넣어주면 되는데요.
The shortcut for intersection is to hold down Shift and Alt at the same time. If you press and hold them like this, the icon below is marked with an X.
표시되는 게 보이시죠? 여기.
So, if you click in this state, only the part you want will appear like this. You can confirm that it is selected. This is not only a choice on canvas. Just like we pressed Ctrl and selected the entire area, the same goes for the layer part.
부분도 마찬가지입니다. 예를 들어서 제가 위에다가 하나 더 만들어 주었어요.
I press Ctrl and choose a different color to pour it.
뭐 이렇게 하나 부어 주었습니다.
Obviously, this heart is colored on a different layer.
있는 것은 다른 레이어예요.
You can see that it's separate like this. However, when I selected this area, let's suppose that I want to exclude only this heart.
제외시키고 싶다고 가정을 해봅시다.
I can select the colors and subtract them, but we'll use shortcuts again. What did I say about the shortcut key to exclude? It's the Alt key. Press the Alt key the same way. But, since you have to select the entire layer, like when we captured it below, while holding down Ctrl, press Alt and click on this layout image.
Alt를 누르고 이 레이어 이미지를 클릭을 해주면요.
Then, only the heart part is excluded from the selection.
확인할 수가 있겠죠.
So, if I erase this heart and only color the remaining part, we can check that it comes out like this.
이렇게 빠져나가는 것을 확인할 수가 있어요.
Likewise, we will use the intersection too. We'll select this heart part again.
하트 부분을 선택을 해줄 겁니다.
We deselect it and reselect the entire area, like this.
이렇게요.
Now, the new selection part is this heart,
부분이 이 하트 영역이죠.
but we see that the heart is already in this gray area.
회색 안에 하트 영역이 속해 있는 것을 볼 수가 있어요.
So this gray part, which is the previously selected part, and this new part, the heart, has an intersection.
교차점이 되는 것을 확인할 수가 있습니다.
At this time, similarly, hold down Ctrl again.
상태에서
In the case of intersection, Shift-Alt is the shortcut key.
단축키라고 했었죠.
Therefore, in the current case, you have to press Ctrl-Shift-Alt.
Alt를 다 눌러줘야 돼요.
Hold down all three and click the heart above it.
하트를 클릭하면
Then only the heart, which is the intersection, remains selected. Use this to work on coloring later. You can proceed more easily. I'll show using the coloring layer in this way one more time in a later practice. For now, concentrate on memorizing these shortcut keys. Now I'll add one more layer on top. Clip Studio has an icon here, which clips the layer to this layer below. If you click, a pink line will appear in front. This means that it belongs to the layer below this. So no matter what color I paint on this, it will fall within the range of colors below this. This is a method I find very useful when I choose the color layer first and choose the light and shade afterward. Then now, since we learned about the selection tool, we will learn about the lasso tool. Here you can see a ton of selection tools. What we'll learn today is this lasso selection tool. If you use this well, you can set the overall large contrast more quickly. However, it is also much more convenient to use shortcut keys. First, let's set a light and shade color and set the overall color to a gray tone.
회색 톤으로 맞춰주겠습니다.
We'll delete this as well. After unifying with one tone, we set the light and shade colors relatively darker.
비교적 조금 더 진하게 잡아주었어요.
It's okay if we paint it one by one, but let's use the lasso tool to make it faster.
올가미 툴로 사용을 해볼게요.
Come here and click the lasso selection tool.
툴을 클릭을 해주시고요.
Then, select the light and shade layer here and draw one area.
영역을 하나 그려주도록 하겠습니다.
In this way, I selected a light and shade that goes below the neck. But we're not going to paint this part only. Other parts need to be added in the same way. I will use the same shortcut keys. I told you what the shortcut key for adding an area is. I told you it was the Shift key. So, once again, hold down Shift and see the icon changing. Let's find Roughlight remaining parts, one by one, where light and shade should be added. I usually create a slightly larger light and shade this way, and refine it later with a brush.
조금 브러쉬 같은 것들로 다듬어 주는 편이에요.
It may be a little awkward at first. Once you get used to this, it'll be much easier and faster.
빠르게 올라올 겁니다.
Let's assume the light is coming from the top left T. Put it in like this. Add some light and shade to the nose. And to the bangs too. Overall, the right side will be brighter in the dark. This sense of lump entering the hair will be set to be simple. As I said before, I set the details with a brush one by one later.
하나하나씩 잡아주는 편입니다.
I'm holding down Shift.
누르고 있는 상태예요.
Areas enter like this. I'll also find the cloth and divided parts in the front. It's okay, even if it's a little crooked. As we continue to make choices like this, if you want to reduce the area a little more, you can use the shortcut key again. Combining with Shift and subtracting. Now, click Alt on this part to exclude it. Press Shift again to select it like this. The part on this side has been checked as well. I'll add a bit larger light and shade here as well. It comes out like this. In this state, recall what was the shortcut for pouring all the colors. To pour the color in front, press Alt Backspace, then you can see the light and shade coming in. In this state, press Ctrl D to cancel it. Then, you can capture a greater light and shade more quickly than painting one by one with a brush. Or, if you click on the layer image while holding down CTRL, the entire area is captured as mentioned before. As this light and shade layer is left out, you can see it's left out like this. So, if you Control-click later, in this way, you can set a light and shade areas. So in here, you can paint different colors. For example, like this. We didn't return it. You can add color to the light and shade. But now, the dotted lines keep moving like this and interfere with our vision. We can erase the dotted lines for a while. They disappear for a moment when you press the shortcut Control. It's not cancelled. It's just out of sight for a while. This is true even if I add a different color.
그쵸?
You can see it hasn't escaped from the outside. Press Ctrl H again to see the originally selected area again. If you want to deselect, press Ctrl D instead of Ctrl H to release it.
해제시켜주면 됩니다. 그럼
So now
이렇게
everything is released like this. This is almost the same in Photoshop.
동일한데요.
I came to the Photoshop screen.
넘어왔습니다.
I'll give a relatively simple explanation of Photoshop. If you look on the left, the thing at the top is the lasso tool, and the thing below it is the selection tool.
아래에 있는 것이 선택 툴인 것을 확인할 수가 있어요.
You can see that the options here are the same.
동일한 게 보이시죠?
The order is also the same, so there is less risk of confusion. Also, there will be the adjacent pixel selection that we checked earlier.
선택이 있을 거예요.
It's this option in the middle here.
이 옵션입니다.
Likewise, there are two layers.
가 있죠.
I selected the body layer below and the layer outside this.
이 바깥에 있는 레이어를 선택을 해줬어요.
Then, the area is determined like this. Likewise, if you press Shift, it is in a union state.
Shift를 누르면은 이런 식으로 합집합 상태가 되는 것을 알 수가 있어요.
As some of the shortcut keys are almost identical, there will be less confusion when using the programs back and forth.
헷갈리는 부분이 줄어들 것 같아요.
Press CTRL and select like this.
해줍니다.
Then, you can create another layer below to flip the selection area.
선택 영역을 뒤집을 수가 있는데요.
Similarly, the shortcut key here is Shift 7 and it goes back like this. If you also look at the menu above, press the select here and the invert here.
여기 반전을 눌러주시면 됩니다.
Then it goes over like this. But we want to use shortcut keys as much as possible. It went in like this. Likewise, now create a gray layer. Similarly, choose a gray color and press Alt Backspace to pour the front color in the paint bucket, like this.
를 눌러 앞에 있는 색상을 페인트 통으로 부어줍니다. 이렇게요.
Here too, gray is the front color.
쪽에 있는 색상이어서
So, it was possible to pour it in with Alt Backspace. Press Ctrl D to release the area. In Clip Studio, we saw if we hold down Ctrl and click the layer icon, the entire area was selected like this.
다 선택되는 걸 클립 스튜디오에서도 봤었죠.
The same goes for Photoshop. The shortcut keys are the same. While holding down CTRL, if you press Shift, you can combine them like this.
쓸 수가 있어요. 근데
But now the line drawing is included inside.
포함이 되고 있어서
So, you can't see this part very well. Let's select body again and take a look. Select the body line. The eye side is now excluded. If you check this eye side line together, while holding down CTRL, if you press Shift, you can see the icon changes.
누르면 아이콘이 변하는 거 보이시죠?
If you click, the face side is selected together.
선택이 됩니다.
Conversely, if you want to remove the face, hold down CTRL, press the Alt key, and you can click to get it out.
클릭하면은 밖으로 빠지게 됩니다.
When you click, only the face will be released.
얼굴 영역만 해제가 되게 됩니다.
If you memorize the shortcut keys for a program, other programs as well have parts that can be equally utilized. To use the programs back and forth, I don't think there will be any problem. Also, there is a more useful feature that I use. This method is a suitable method for semi-rimless or those who draw pictures by stacking them up, or those who draw in one layer.
적합한 방법입니다.
Think of it as just one tip.
해주시면 될 것 같아요.
The part is that each layer is divided one by one.
하나씩 나누어져 있죠.
However, if these layers are combined, and let's assume that we need an image only for this part.
필요하다고 가정을 해보겠습니다.
At that time, I made a choice with this square frame.
틀로 선택을 해줬어요.
If you copy and paste in this state, only this selected layer will be copied.
선택된 레이어에 한해서만 복사가 되겠죠.
But if we want to combine all the areas we see, we can use the shortcut key, which is Ctrl-Shift-C.
어떤 거냐면 Ctrl-Shift-C를 누르면은요.
Then, everything you see is copied within this selection area. If I press Ctrl-Shift-V, the image will be attached to the location I chose.
선택한 요 자리에 그대로 이미지가 붙게 됩니다.
You can see it separated like this.
보이시죠?
The square area I chose has been copied and separated like this, as you can see.
채워진 것을 확인할 수가 있을 거예요.
So, if a part needs to be modified a little bit, or if you have something taught by copying and pasting, you can use this kind of function.
붙일 부분이 생기면 이런 식의 기능을 활용해 볼 수가 있겠죠.
Later in the work, after combining all the line drawing and coloring, I usually use this feature quite a bit in the organizing stage.
조금 많이 활용하고 있습니다.
So, doesn't Clip Studio have this feature?
있을까요?
Unfortunately, Clip Studio has no function for selecting and cutting inly the visible part as it is. So the way I do it is the following. First, just like before, I choose the part I want, like this.
제가 원하는 부분을 선택을 해줬어요. 이렇게요.
However, even if you use the shortcut key, the equally combined image of only the selected parts is not cut off. So, at this time, right-click on the layer here and go straight down until you will see a part, merge selected layers.
내려가다 보면 표시 레이어 복사본 결합이라는 부분이 보입니다.
Click on this.
클릭해주세요.
This is it. Then you can see that there is a copy at the top.
생긴 것을 알 수가 있어요.
This literally means adding a copy of the sum of all visible layers.
복사본을 하나 추가해 준다는 의미입니다.
So in this image state, press Ctrl X to cut.
컨트롤 X 눌러서 잘라주고요.
Press Ctrl V again and paste it in its place.
자리에 붙여줍니다.
The image below is an image of the cut area I selected.
이미지라서
I don't need it, so I'll delete it.
할게요.
Now you can see that this is the only thing left. It may be a bit cumbersome, but I use it this way in Clip Studio.
사용을 하고 있고요.
In this case too, in the shortcut settings, you can select this merge selected layers.
결합을 선택해 줄 수 있습니다.
If this becomes a feature you use often, I also recommend setting a separate shortcut key.
것도 추천드릴게요.
This has been a brief introduction to the lasso tool and selection tool. If you are directly involved in color scheme and the coloring and shading works progress, these features are very useful.
굉장히 유용하게 쓰이게 됩니다.
So, since this part is memorization, it may be difficult, but it is very easy once you get used to it.
굉장히 편하기 때문에 꼭
Be sure to practice several times so that it becomes natural in your hands.
만들어 보시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
Among the tools mentioned earlier, there was a ruler.
자가 있었죠.
The ruler will be explained later in the penetration and original drawing lessons.
각각 다시 설명드리도록 할게요.
In the penetration lesson, the ruler function in Clip Studio is very convenient to use.
굉장히 편하고요.
In the original drawing, the ruler function in Photoshop can be very useful.
굉장히 유용하게 사용할 수가 있습니다.
Today, we've learned about the lasso tool and selection tool briefly, one by one.
알아봤고요.
Let's summarize this one more time and review it.
보도록 하겠습니다.
You see it here, Shift for union, Alt for difference.
경우 Shift, 차집합의 경우 Alt 키.
In the case of intersection, which you want to remove, you can select it by pressing the Shift and Alt keys at the same time.
눌러주면 선택이 됩니다.
While holding down Ctrl, if you click on this layer, imagine the layer window, all parts on this clicked layer can be chosen at once.
클릭한 레이어에 있는 모든 부분을 한 번에 선택할 수가 있어요.
Remember that for the parts in this layer window, the Shift and Alt shortcuts shown above are applicable likewise, only if you hold down C or E.
단축키들이 동일하게 들어간다는 거. 대신에 컨트롤을 누른 상태로 진행이 돼야 된다는 거 기억을 해두시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
Below is a brief overview of how to hide the selected area, the dotted line, from showing.
숨기는 방법을 정리해놨고요.
On the right, how to flip the selected area is summarized. The shortcut key is the same, Shift F7. Be sure to remember this as well.
좋을 것 같습니다.
The following is a case where I select and use only the parts I want.
사용하는 경우인데요.
In Clip Studio, we had to combine copies off the display layer, and, after creating a new image, we had to cut and paste this part.
잘라내고 붙여넣는 방식을 사용할 수밖에 없었지만
In Photoshop, we can press Ctrl-Shift-C, Ctrl-Shift-V to combine the visible parts of the selected parts at once and paste it.
부분을 한 번에 합쳐서
Since it's a very convenient feature, it would be good to know.
꼭 알아두시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
Next, let's find out the layer properties briefly together.
함께 알아보도록 하겠습니다.
I just brought the previous picture with the color scheme completed.
가져왔어요.
I cut the layer properties of Clip Studio and Photoshop. and imported them separately.
가져왔습니다.
I checked the properties mainly used when drawing.
사용하는 속성들을 체크해 두었어요.
Some have the same name and other shapes similar but slightly different names.
것도 존재합니다.
The ones at the top make the picture relatively dark.
만드는 역할을 하고 있고요.
The ones checked below add light to the picture.
빛을 추가해 주는 부분들입니다.
Let's take a quick look at each one.
보도록 하겠습니다.
We're back to Photoshop again.
왔는데요.
Here, consider normal as the most basic layer property that color doesn't change and is used for the color scheme and coloring.
채색 때 사용하는 가장 기본적인 레이어 속성이라고 생각을 해주시면 될 것 같습니다.
As a slightly easier example, think of layering opaque plain colored papers.
생각을 해주시면 될 것 같아요.
So if you color on top of this,
채색을 하게 되면
in this way, the colors do not overlap but go up separately.
올라가게 되죠.
Like this. Also, in the case of multiply below, it's the most popular option that's used when using shadows.
가장 많이 사용하는 옵션입니다.
We used the lasso tool to make an example earlier, adding the dark part zone by one in the same way.
어두운 부분을 하나씩 추가를 해서요.
Previously, we added a shadow with the normal layer. If you add a shadow with a multiply layer, the color is influenced by the color below, and you can see it moving.
아래 색상의 영향을 받아서 움직이는 것을 볼 수가 있습니다.
I'll show you the difference from the normal layer. It is now selected in green.
되어 있었는데요.
If you set it to normal, all parts are colored equally and look the same.
돌아가는데 똑같죠?
In the case of multiply, the color is affected by the color below and goes up like this.
올라가게 됩니다.
So, if you consider multiply as cellophane, unlike the normal layer, which was opaque colored paper, it will be a little easier to understand.
라고 생각을 해주시면 조금 더 이해하기가 쉬우실 것 같습니다.
It seems to be a layer property that is used much when creating a shadow or adding darkness overall.
속성인 것 같습니다.
Also, this darken above it has a part, darkening.
이 어둡게 하기라는 부분이 있는데요.
It's good to see this layer in comparison with the lighten underneath.
속성과 비교를 해가면서 보는 게 좋아요.
It means the following. First, let me erase what is drawn for a moment.
그려져 있는 것을 잠깐 지우도록 할게요.
I created a new layer.
그렇습니다.
I zoomed in and checked the brightness on the skin.
있는 밝기를 확인했습니다.
You can see that it is very bright, almost white.
것을 확인할 수가 있죠.
But what is this darkening property?
어떤 것이냐면
I'll pick a color.
색상 하나를 골라보겠습니다.
I chose one like this.
선택을 했고요.
Then I changed it to the darkening property mentioned earlier.
꺼줬어요.
Also, if you pour color like this, the color doesn't go everywhere.
모든 곳에 들어가는 것이 아니라
You can see that the color is reflected this way only in a very limited part. Mainly in the skin and yellow parts, there's a lot of color.
파츠 쪽에 색상이 많이 들어갔네요.
The function of this darkening is to make an area lighter than the selected color darker with this color.
선택한 색상보다 밝은 색의 영역을 이 색상으로 어둡게 만들어 준다는 의미입니다.
It's a little confusing. Then, contrary to this, how does brightening come out?
밝게 하기는 어떻게 나올까요?
I'll pick a color this time as well.
마찬가지로 색을 하나 골라보도록 하겠습니다.
This time, I will choose a bright color. When you cover the color, it means making a color darker than the color I chose brighter to the chosen colors.
지금 고른 색상으로 밝게 밝혀준다는 의미입니다.
So you can see that ithas become brighter overall. So, where can I use this function?
어디에 사용하냐면
Usually, I use the darkening when making final corrections, as a role to add a small amount of color to the skin or bright parts.
밝은 파트 쪽에 색상을 소량 넣어주는 역할로 활용을 하고 있습니다.
When using photos, I can use it more naturally.
자연스럽게 사용할 수가 있는데요.
For example, let's assume there is an image like this. I need to use this image, but guess what the disadvantages of a photo is?
사용을 해야 하는데 사진의 단점이 무엇인가요?
The disadvantage is that the density is so high that the picture we draw and photos cannot be mixed due to this density difference.
섞여 들어가지 못한다는 단점이 있습니다.
So this dense pixel part needs to be filled with a solid color.
혹은 단색으로 채워줄 필요가 있습니다.
In this case, what we have to use are the darkening and brightening functions.
밝게 하기 기능입니다.
Let's use it here and see what happens.
보도록 하겠습니다.
Take a look at the leaves here.
을 한번 봐주세요.
I added a layer and created darkening on top of this.
어둡게 하기를 만들어줬어요.
Here you can see that the pixels are really diluted.
색이 엄청 자글자글한 것이 보이시죠?
Here, pick a slightly darker color, and, after selecting the airbrush, press it like this.
조금 어두운 색상을 하나 골라서요. 에어브러쉬를 선택한 다음에 이렇게 눌러주면
You can see that the colors are unified as one. So, when viewed from a distance, it looks closer to a painting.
형태가 됩니다.
If we compare, the difference will appear like this.
차이가 나타나겠죠.
Conversely, this time we will use brightening.
밝게 하기를 사용해 볼게요.
Create the same series.
레이어를 만들어 주고요.
Click on a slightly darker color and tap it with an airbrush.
에어브러쉬로 콕콕콕 찍어서 넣어주면
When viewed from a distance much more than before, it looks something closer to a painting.
이렇게 보이시죠?
You can see that the density has drastically decreased. When using photo sources, this feature is frequently used.
많이 사용하는 기능입니다.
We're back again.
좋았어요.
The layer properties below this are related to light.
관한 속성인데요.
We create a layer. The rest are empty layers.
인데요.
Let's look at them one by one. I'll make an additional layer on top.
만들어 주겠습니다.
I made it a sub-layer like this. Let's change this layer to an overlay layer.
로 바꿔 주겠습니다.
Let's change this layer to a screen layer.
로 바꿔 주도록 하겠습니다.
In the case of screen, the colors easily fade to white.
날아가는 경향이 있는데요.
This is the option I mainly use when using light. Let me show you.
드리도록 할게요.
Let's add it using the same lasso tool.
보도록 하겠습니다.
As it is the comb part, I'll add it considering the light coming direction.
부분을 생각을 해서 넣어 주도록 하겠습니다.
Let's proceed a little rough.
그죠?
I'll just add a little bit to this part. The shortcut for pouring color in the paint bucket was Alt Backspace.
여기는 Alt Backspace라고 했었죠.
You can add light all at once like this.
수가 있습니다.
The color we originally chose was a bright color like this. But under the influence of the layer below, the color has changed slightly.
바뀐 것을 확인할 수가 있어요.
The saturation of the original color has dropped, as you can see. It will fly all the way to white tone like this. So when you want to add strong light, it would be a good idea to use this screen layer. If you change this to overlay, do you see a different vibe from before?
오버레이로 바꾼다면은요. 이전과 다른 느낌이 보이시나요?
Rather than falling into a white tone, you can see that the saturation increases. It's all going up like this.
올라가고 있죠.
The overlay layer is used to increase the saturation of the picture or make this type of corrections.
네, 주로 사용하는 레이어입니다.
Soft light can be seen at a glance when compared to screen.
보이시는데요.
It is in soft light, mode and screen changes like this.
이런 식으로 편하죠.
Screen itself is a very strong light and shows a tendency for all colors to fly close to a white tone.
날아가는 경향이 있고요.
Think of soft light as adding a slightly softer color than screen.
생각하시면 됩니다.
Basically, you can see that this character has changes like this.
이렇게 변화가 들어가는 것을 확인할 수가 있어요. 이렇게.
The difference in the color spectrum of this light is completely different from when it was previously put by screen.
다른 것을 확인할 수가 있죠.
When you want to give a soft light feeling, use this soft light.
사용하시면 됩니다.
If you look at the hard light below, it looks a little similar to screen.
조금 스크린이랑 비슷하게 보이죠?
You can think of hard light as spreading light while keeping the colors more.
장식이 된 채로 빛을 뿌려주는 느낌이라 생각하시면 될 것 같아요.
Let's add light with a stronger color than now.
빛을 넣어보도록 하겠습니다.
It enters like this. Can you see it? In this way, while keeping the colors we originally chose almost intact, the color increases.
올라가는 것을 확인할 수가 있습니다.
If we compare it with other properties, soft light is greatly affected by the layer below in this way, and the color changes a lot.
색이 굉장히 많이 바뀌는 것을 볼 수가 있고요.
The same goes for overlay. Screen appears in this way, but in the case of hard light, the saturation remains very vivid.
굉장히 선명하게 남아 있죠.
I usually use hard light a lot when making expressions like neon signs.
많이 사용합니다.
Finally, the color dodge.
칼라 닷지 부분인데요.
This function is mainly used when coloring metals.
사용을 하고 있어요.
It would be nice to add color like now, but dodge properties like this rises most effectively if you cover the basic color scheme with black and add the color of light on top.
색으로 덮은 다음에 위에다가 빛의 색상을 얹어주는 편이 가장 효과적으로 올라갑니다.
Even if you pour black over the entire area, if you change the layer properties, black won't appear at all.
나타나지 않죠.
As this black is mixed with the color I chose, you can see the light coming up like this.
빛이 이렇게 올라오는 것을 확인할 수가 있어요.
Bright colors appear as the saturation rises just like metals.
나타나는 게 꼭 금속 같지 않나요?
This property is the layer property most often used when coloring metals.
레이어 속성인 것 같습니다.
Like now, on the border between light and darkness, the saturation goes up.
올라가는 것도 확인을 할 수가 있겠죠.
When you color metals, if you use the dodge layer properties, even though other layer properties are good as well, you will be able to express metal more effectively.
금속 표현이 가능하실 겁니다.
We briefly looked in Photoshop layer properties.
알아봤는데요.
The same goes for Clip Studio. Let's move over to Clip Studio. Likewise, if you look here, there is a darkened, a multiply layer property.
곱하기 레이어 속성이 있죠.
Now, if you go all the way down, you can see screen and color dodge. This is also the part that goes up, burning the color similarly to the color dodge.
올라가는 부분입니다.
From here to here, you can think that it burns the color and emits very strong light.
굉장히 강한 빛을 뿌려준다고 생각하시면 될 것 같아요.
As before, overlay plays the role of increasing saturation. Soft light emits light weakly.
약하게 뿌려준다.
Hard light itself is such a layer property that makes light while retaining the original color value very strongly.
빛으로 만들어주는
It would be good to know that.
거 알아두시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
Finally, there is a layer property that is not easy to find.
속성이 하나가 있는데요.
It's a layer property, pass. This pass means that it doesn't appear on the regular layer.
레이어에는 나오지 않고요.
It is a layer property that only exists in a folder. It is shown like this, but doesn't show up here. This layer property only applies to folders. What does this mean? It means it expresses every value of this property in this folder.
다 표현을 해준다는 의미예요.
However, if this property is set to normal as standard,
표준으로 되어 있다면 밑에 있는 색상을 만약에 일반 표준 레이어가 아닌 스크린이나 아니면 닷지 같이 빛 레이어 속성을 사용해 준다면 내가 원하는 그 느낌이 그대로 안 나타날 수가 있습니다.
the layer properties of a folder are very important. Let me show you how they appear.
한번 보여드리도록 할게요.
For example, let's assume I create an empty layer at the top.
빛 레이어를 하나 만들었다고 가정을 해보겠습니다.
I painted one like this and made this character with screen.
그리고 이 친구를 스크린으로 만들어 주었습니다.
The layer properties are entered like this. But if the properties of the folder containing this layer are set to normal instead of through, they are not reflected properly.
노말로 되어 있으면 이렇게 제대로 반영이 안 되는 걸 볼 수가 있습니다.
But the problem is that the default settings of Clip Studio are such that this folder appears as normal. So, it is better to change the settings of this part in advance when working on it later.
진행하실 때 편하실 거예요.
This can be changed in the environment setting.
수가 있는데요.
If you look at the menu above, go to eFile, Preference.
파일에 환경 설정을 들어갑니다.
A window pops up. Here, enter the Layer Frame menu.
메뉴로 들어갑니다.
Then, the window will change again like this.
변경이 될 거예요.
In this part here, you see use through blending mode for new layer folders.
합성 모드를 통과로 하기.
You need to check this part.
해주셔야 됩니다.
I have it checked so it appears like this.
보시는 거예요. 아마
If you haven't set it up separately in Clip Studio, this part will be unchecked.
삭제가 되어 있을 겁니다.
So, check this and then click OK.
해주시면 이후
Then, when
폴더를
creating a
통해
folder later, it won't be normal, but through like this.
나오는 것을 볼 수가 있어요.
On the other hand, Photoshop's default setting is through. So, there is no need to set this part separately. Photoshop and Clip Studio have this difference, just be aware.
알아두시면 좋을 것 같아요.
So today, we've learned about Clip Studio and Photoshop one at a time.
한 번씩 알아보았는데요.
For the ruler that we couldn't explain today, as I said before, I'll explain one more time in the perspective and the original drawing lesson.
한 번 더 설명을 드리도록 하겠습니다.
As we learned today, we looked into two similar but different programs.
두 가지 프로그램에 대해 알아보았는데요.
I hope you feel more familiar with them than before.
되셨기를 바라겠습니다.
Then, let's proceed to this point today. I'll see you next time.
뵙도록 하겠습니다.
Thank you for your hard work today. Thank you.